Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's 60-minute presentation as part of the Wednesday Rainmaking webinar series presented by the Women Rainmakers in the ABA Law Practice Division. My name is Austin Conley, and I am the Marketing Assistant of the Legal Technology Resource Center. I'd like to take the time to make a few announcements before I turn things over to our Rainmakers. Please note that there is a PDF copy of the slides which can be found in the Handouts tab located under the question box on the right side of your screen. Please assist our Women Rainmakers Committee by taking the time to complete the evaluation, which will be emailed to you immediately at the end of the program. This assists us in developing future programs, and we really welcome your input. Our moderator today is Anna Rappaport. Anna is the founder and principal of Acceleration Coaching. She is a former lawyer with 17 years of experience coaching attorneys on business development, leadership, and career strategy. Anna publishes regularly in the American Bar Association's Law Practice Today magazine and the National Law Review, and speaks around the country on various career and business development topics. Thank you all for joining us. I'll go ahead and turn things over.
Thank you, Austin. We thank all the Rainmakers around the country who have chosen to learn more about asking for business to assist their rainmaking for 2018. Oops, sorry. The mission of the ABA Women Rainmakers is to educate professional women about marketing and business development, to provide mentoring opportunities for members, and to provide networking opportunities to build personal and professional relationships. We will be conducting this webinar in a question and answer format to give our speakers the opportunity to address common questions that attorneys in private practice have about approaching in-house counsel and asking for business. Feel free to enter your questions using the questions box in the webinar panel to the right of your screen. I will do my best to fit in your questions in among our pre-selected slate of questions or at the end. So today we are fortunate to have three wonderful speakers to provide insight on asking for business from the viewpoint of in-house counsel. Today's speakers are Angela Speight, Vice President and General Counsel for PetroStar Inc., Shaila Lakhani Ohri, Assistant General Counsel at Exelon, and Erin H. Abrams, General Counsel at Via Transportation Inc. Angela Speight is General Counsel for PetroStar Inc., the only Alaska-owned refining and fuel marketing operation in the state, serving residential, military, marine, aviation, and industrial customers. She has extensive experience in corporate governance, compliance, mergers and acquisitions, oil field operations and service agreements, construction and engineering services, contract negotiations and operator agreements, as well as human resources training and IT services. Shaila Lakhani Ohri is Assistant General Counsel with Exelon, a Fortune 100 energy company. Shaila's broad experience includes complex litigation, electronic discovery, antitrust, cybersecurity, licensing, intellectual property, commercial transactions, mergers and acquisitions, venture capital, financing and secured transactions, corporate restructurings, securities and employment matters. She is a trustee for the South Asian Bar Association of North America Foundation and involved with the National Asia Pacific Bar, American Bar, and other diverse bar associations. Erin Abrams is the General Counsel at Via Transportation Inc., a technology startup in the on-demand shared ride space. As the head of legal at Via, Erin's portfolio covers corporate transactions, venture-backed financing, cybersecurity and data privacy, technology licensing, commercial agreements, transportation regulatory and licensing issues, employee and independent contractor matters, and litigation. Erin also manages Via's patent portfolio and oversees risk, insurance, and compliance functions at Via. So what is asking for business? Before we dive into the questions, I'd like to clarify what we're talking about today when we refer to asking for business. So for the purpose of today's webinar, we are referring to the whole process of client development, from the time you meet someone through the follow-up phase, making a pitch, etc. Because of course the pitch can be formal or informal, and then of course finally signing the contract. So we're looking at the whole process because there's numerous decision points and opportunities within this cycle where you might be asking for something, asking for an opportunity, asking to improve a relationship, etc. You may ask for someone's business card. You ask if they'd be interested in receiving a white paper you wrote on a particular subject, if they'd like to have lunch. So all of these asks hopefully leading to getting business. So today I'm going to start with a couple general questions to set the stage, and then the remaining questions are grouped into categories: networking, follow-up, specifically asking for business, and then pitching. So unfortunately, because we do have limited time, we're not going to be able to get answers from every panelist on every question, but we'll try and distribute it in a way that makes sense. But the first general questions will be covering each of the panelists. So let's start with Angela. When you need new outside counsel, how do you identify candidates and then narrow the field?
Hi, Anna. This is Angela. Thanks so much for including me on this panel. And just to dive right in on how we select new counsel, I work with a parent company, Arctic Slope Regional Corporation, and a collection of other general counsels and their legal team. And typically, I go to them first and seek referrals on who they've been successful with, who they've enjoyed working with. And we also maintain a recommended counsel list. But from there, I typically reach out to subject matter experts or friends that I have in the field.
Thanks. And then once you know you've gotten some recommendations, how do you then narrow down who you'd like to end up actually working with?
Typically, I reach out to each of the recommendations that I receive and schedule maybe a brief 20-minute call to discuss the matter at hand, whether it's a transactional or litigation-related matter. And from there, we kind of dive right in. One of the things I try to challenge new counsel that I'm working with is to give me their take on something that is unique. Don't give me just the standard, this is your next step, but tell me some outside the box solutions that we can discuss on how to approach this problem.
Thanks. Shaila, what about you? Would you mind going next?
Sure. And thanks also for including me in the panel. For me, I think I use a couple of different approaches. Our company has an approved outside counsel list, and that is really the preferred way to hire outside counsel. And so we tend to have to start from that list unless there is an exception. And one of the main exceptions that we have, or the easiest way to get an exception, is if we want to engage what is a minority or women-owned law firm. The general counsel really thinks that we should be doing more to promote minority and women-owned law firms, as well as making sure that our work is given to minority and women and diverse attorneys within our majority law firms. And so that's one way to get an exception as well. But we tend to start with our outside counsel list, and so a lot of my ways of trying to promote diversity is to try to get new people on the list. And I generally try to, that happens either also through networking or through connections or referrals, or having seen someone in action in another transaction, for example.
Thanks. Erin, do you mind going next? Erin? I don't know, we can't hear you if you're talking. When you need new outside counsel, how do you identify candidates and then narrow the field?
Can you hear me now?
Yep, we can hear you.
Perfect. So when I identify new outside counsel, I have a roster of firms that I already know and have pre-screened and have worked with in advance. And I typically start with them. But then I also might reach out to subject matter experts who are outside of my network. Because we're a startup, we're a little bit more nimble and flexible, and I do have quite a lot of latitude to deviate from that existing roster of firms that I'm familiar with. I use a couple of resources in my network, like I belong to a group of tech GCs, and so sometimes I'll send an email to that list and ask for a recommendation. I also belong to a group of women general counsels. It's called WGCN, which is a great resource for women GCs. And not only does that list have a wealth of knowledge in general, but they often specifically recommend women practitioners in whatever field of expertise I'm seeking. And then usually if it's a small matter, I might reach out to them and schedule a quick introductory phone call. If it's a really big, significant matter, then I might reach out to them to schedule an in-person meeting and have them do a more formal pitch, with pitch materials, and bring several members of the team to meet in person.
Great. So let's move on now to just something more specific with regard to women and diverse attorneys. And Shaila, you already responded to this, I think, to some extent, but is there anything else that you wanted to add in terms of how you might make a special effort to give work to women or diverse attorneys?
Is that for
well,
me?
yeah.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Meaning apart from what we've discussed, or just would you like me to go more into that?
Well, I was just checking if you had anything else to add. If you'd like to go more into it, that would be great.
Okay, sure. Yeah, so for example, the company is a Fortune 100 company. We've been trying to streamline our legal costs, and so there is that list of majority firms that are on our approved counsel list. We track and we require tracking by all of our outside firms and annual reporting of all the diverse categories and how much time and money was spent by diverse attorneys on our matters. And we track it on actually it's not annual, it's monthly. We track it on a monthly basis as well as an annual basis. And we have certain requirements for which a firm can be on our honor roll, which is a minimum amount of minority participation, and that's got to be substantive participation on our matters. So that's how we try to influence the majority firms that we do work with. I mentioned also the minority and women-owned law firms. We support NAMWOLF and we support other organizations that try to find opportunities for minority and women-owned law firms. And especially for a company our size, it's not always easy for them to get in, and there's not a lot of them that have energy expertise. But for example, in Chicago, when we own 6 utilities, and our utility in Chicago, ComEd, started a program this year where our majority law firm that was providing us with regulatory advice is partnering with a minority women-owned law firm, and they're working together on our regulatory matters. And basically, the majority firm is training this minority women-owned law firm, so that right now we're working with both of them. And then the idea would be that as time goes and they're trained up on energy matters and the way we do business, that we can use them more.
Great. Erin, what about you? As a woman, do you make a special effort to work with women and diverse attorneys? And if so, how?
You know, I would say I do try to. I always want to find the best possible person to represent us in any given matter, but oftentimes that person is a woman, and I try to look out for ways to keep a diverse bench on our matters. And one thing I would add on this point, it's not really enough for me just to hire the firm or to hire the woman partner. To me, I've kind of tried to stay involved in making sure that those people are retained and engaged on our matters in a way where they really get credit for having developed the business. Like, I'll give you an example. We recently had a matter that was a litigation type matter that was before a particular commission. And we hired a firm that we had a long relationship with that we had never worked on a litigation type matter with. We used them for other regulatory purposes. And the reason we hired this firm was because they had a woman who was a junior partner, who was an African-American woman, who had previously been a senior official at this commission, where we had then had this litigation-like proceeding in front of. And so we specifically sought out this firm because of her prior experience with this commission. And after we began on the matter, I started to get the first month's, the second month's bill, and see that a senior partner at the firm, who we had a long relationship with, happened to be a white male, but he, didn't have the relevant direct expertise on the matter, but he knew us and he was interested in us as a client, and he was billing quite a lot of time to the matter and just sort of opining on the matter and weighing in on calls. And I called him up and I had a very frank discussion with him, and I said, we do have a relationship with your firm, but honestly, we wouldn't have hired your firm for this matter, except for the fact that this junior partner that you have has direct relevant experience, having just come from this commission we're litigating in front of. That isn't your subject matter expertise, you personally. And so if you're interested in keeping track of the matter, that's totally fine, but I don't want to see your time on the bill anymore. We hired her, she's the managing partner, and we want to see her time on the bill. And I think that really realigned how we thought about the matter.
Absolutely. Thanks. Angela, do you have anything to add in terms of how you approach this?
Yeah, absolutely. I just want to echo Erin's comments. I had a kind of similar experience. We had a matter that I had a particular, actually, young female associate at a large firm that had direct experience on that. we were working really well together. I had actually invited her to come to our offices and spend some time in our offices to get to know our operations better. But I had to maintain an active management on the matter to make sure that she still was receiving the substantive work and that she was receiving the time and attention that the matter needed, because there were some other folks that wanted to kind of intercede on her behalf. And I think it really helped. And now she is very knowledgeable about our operations and a crucial part of our team.
I'm sure everyone on the call is really delighted to hear about in-house counsel being that proactive in terms of making sure the right people get credit. All right, we're going to move on to the topic of networking. So let me start with Erin. What is your approach to networking? And do you ever hire attorneys whom you met at networking functions?
Well, I would say my approach to networking these days is very selective if I had to categorize it. I'm super busy at work, and I'm also a mom. And so between work and family, I've had to prioritize the kind of networking engagements. Whereas earlier on in my career, I might, go to several functions a week that might be sort of generally categorized as networking. Now I try like one or two, every other week maybe. And I try to really focus on things that are highly relevant for my space, that are specifically related to technology or ride sharing or the automotive world. I am trying to meet other potential attorneys to hire. That is something that I'm interested in. But also in a venture capital-backed business, I'm also interested in networking with other types of people, not just attorneys, like potential investors or other people in our space that could be potential partners for us. So I haven't actually hired an attorney that I met at a networking function. I have met a lot of attorneys at networking functions, and I kind of keep them in mind and keep them in that roster of people that I would consider reaching out to in the future. But I think the attorneys that I've engaged so far generally tend to be people who I have prior experience with and prior knowledge of, and maybe even have worked with in my past.
Okay, thanks. Shaila, what about you? What's your approach to networking, and do you ever hire attorneys whom you met at networking functions?
Yeah, I mean, my approach to network, I have a lot of colleagues, and this is the second company that I've worked with in-house, and I have a number of colleagues, I think, in-house, and I'm sure that a lot of the firm folks or even my in-house colleagues will recognize this. I think there are a number of in-house attorneys that don't place any value on networking. They don't make any effort. They don't get out of the office. They come in, they do their job, and then they leave. And that's fine because that's their approach, and that's fine. But I have a little bit of a different approach. I feel like networking is important. It's important to expand your network and to make good contacts. My esteemed colleagues that are on the panel with me have already reached general counsel status, but that's something I aspire to. And I think for those of us that have had long in-house careers, we know that usually that next step up comes from changing jobs. And so it's really important for me to make good connections and to network. And so I really see networking as a two-way street, and I think for that reason, I'm probably a lot more approachable than some of my colleagues when it comes to networking with for law firm attorneys, because I see it as a give and take relationship. In other words, I have something to give and I have something to receive, and vice versa. And so along those lines, I'm involved in a lot of bar associations, and I believe in what they're doing, and I take on leadership roles. So I'm one of the co-chairs, national co-chairs of the Women's Leadership Network for the Asian Bar, and I'm for the DC Asian Bar, I'm one of the in-house counsel co-chairs, and as you mentioned, I'm on the trustee for South Asian Bar Foundation. And so, but besides that, I attend conferences, I go to CLE opportunities, I go to events at the ACC, and through those organizations and through those events, I have met a number of attorneys. And, I think in the past, there's been quite a few that I feel like I've connected with. They've made a good follow-up. They have a lot to offer, and I see that we are aligned in the way that we think about things. I've talked to them a number of times, and so, or run into them a number of times, and so they are top of mind. And I have hired them before, and they are the ones, for example, when I really think a lot of them, that I will go to bat and I will go to the company and say, how do we get more people on the outside counsel list?
Great, thank you. So what about leveraging existing relationships? This is something I hear a lot from clients. Women are sometimes reticent to initiate business conversations when they have a friend or relative or neighbor, someone who they have a pre-existing relationship with. Angela, could you take this one? What is your advice to women who find themselves in this situation?
My advice would be to jump in. I worked with an excellent managing partner when I was still in a law firm, and he worked with his friends every day. All of our clients were good friends, close friends, either friends before or friends after they became clients. And he used to tell me all the time that he loved working with his friends, and he didn't understand why anyone wouldn't want to. And I'm happy to say that a ton of my outside counsel are close friends of mine, and I enjoy working with them. I can be very honest and candid and frank with them, and I think that it's been helpful to our professional relationship.
Thank you. And so on a similar note, but sometimes a law firm lawyer might reach out to an in-house lawyer, initially intending to talk about business, but they might find, in the course of having lunch or other activities, that they really created more of a friendship and didn't quite get around to talking about business yet. So, and then that woman often feels even more awkward bringing up business opportunities. So, Erin, if you were in that situation, how would you feel as the in-house lawyer?
Yeah, I would say don't feel awkward about it at all. I think it's a very permeable, not at all a barrier. I think there are a lot of scenarios where you start out as business associates, you become friends, then maybe you work together again in the future, or you start out as friends and you become business associates. Like I can think of a few examples from my professional career. One is a law firm partner who I worked with when I was at a law firm, and she mentored me, and I really grew up under her learning how to be a lawyer. Then when I left my law firm world, I didn't work with her for several years when I was in-house at a bank and didn't have the discretion to choose my own in-house counsel. And until I joined VIA, we maintained our friendship. We would see each other socially. She knew I didn't have the ability to hire her directly, but we maintained a friendship. And then when I got to VIA, I also thought about, what are some ways that I could bring her into the fold at VIA? How could I find a way to hire her and incorporate her into our work here? And it just happened that she was living next door to our CFO, who had recently bought a new apartment and was doing a gut renovation of her apartment. And so I introduced the two of them, and I said, oh, you've recently renovated your apartment? You have a new renovation that you're embarking on? Let me introduce the two of you. You can come over, take a tour of our apartment, see how it is. And our CFO and I went over to visit this law firm partner's apartment. And then I brought a new person from my company into our friendship. And then a few months down the line, a matter came up that fell squarely within her area of expertise. And so then it was much easier for me to talk to our team and talk to our CFO and say, hey, I think I want to retain this old friend of mine. You know her, you've met her, you know that she's a good person. Is that okay? Do you approve this? And our CFO said, of course. She seems like a great person. I met her now several times. It went over much more smoothly because there had been that social connection. Another example is, at my son's school, there are a couple of other lawyer moms that I'm friendly with, and one of them is the managing partner at a firm that we already work with, but since I've gotten to know her better, it has deepened my relationship with that firm, and I've thought of them in not only the one specific vertical we work with them on, which is data privacy, but also expanding out to other types of matters that firm handles. Another person in this circle of mom lawyers that we're friends with is a former prosecutor, and I've been thinking about, would it be a good idea to hire someone at VIA who has that skill set? And so I thought about this person who was a lawyer in my mom's network in terms of bringing her in and hiring her, for an opportunity at my company. And so I think that, there's a lot of different ways that you can leverage your friendships. And I would encourage everyone to do that and not to feel awkward about it.
Thank you. All right, now we're going to move on to follow-up. So law firm lawyers are always trying to reach out to in-house lawyers to build relationships. I'm going to ask each of you this question because I just think it's super important to want to get everyone's perspective. Let's start with Angela. What are some approaches that you particularly appreciate in terms of the way people reach out to follow up and create relationships with you?
I'll give you two good examples, both women outside counsel that I work with currently. One of them is across in DC, and so every time that I am in DC, one, she follows up with me to make sure that she knows when I'm going to be in town, and two, without fail, she makes time for me to either have dinner or to take me out to lunch. She actually researched an opening at the National Gallery, an exhibit at the National Gallery that I was interested in. I mean, it's the personal touch that she brings to kind of maintaining that relationship that's just fantastic. And another one here in Anchorage, locally, I get to see her much more often, but she knows that I have a real passion for the symphony, and so she makes a point to invite me to go with her to the symphony and to, again, try to share an interest with me that maybe isn't necessarily purely based on the work that we do together, but really builds our relationship.
Thanks. Shaila, what about you? What are some approaches you particularly appreciate?
I think I span the gamut. I mean, I've had attorneys that just keep up with things that they know that I'm interested in. So, they know that my workload historically has covered such a broad array of legal topics. And so, I'm always doing new things. And so, those that take an interest or really hear me about what it is that I'm working on, that invite me to events at their firm, they know that I really support a lot of diverse bar associations. And so reaching out and saying, hey, I know that your bar association, does pro bono, or they do this. How can I get involved? How can I help? Just those opportunities, I think, where you get a chance to see somebody outside of the work. You build that rapport, you build trust. You feel like you have a lot in common, and ultimately, at least for me, and I'm not sure that I'm unique in this way, I want to give my work to someone who I think has my back. I want to give my work to someone who's going to make me look good, to management, who's going to keep me informed, who's going to feel comfortable telling me all the bad news, but is also going to be creative enough to get me out of those bad situations. And so you can read a lot about a person in spending time with them personally. And I think especially as women, we tend to trust our gut and we tend to trust our instincts. And so, it can be just sending me articles. It could be inviting me to substantive, legal CLEs, but it can also be invitations on a personal note, like what was mentioned. I like sports, and so I get invited to hockey games or things like that, or dinners, or another one that I really appreciated was, hey, it turns out that there's you and there's 3 or 4 other in-house counsel that I know and I've run into networking wise, and I really would like to connect the 4 or 5 of you guys together, because I think you could offer a lot to one another by way of support, or just a network, or just being able to, you work in similar fields. Let me host a dinner where I can introduce you guys together, and that's been great.
Terrific. Erin, I know they've both covered a lot already. Is there anything you have to add?
Yeah, I have a couple examples I can think of. One outside counsel partner that I work with, she organizes a monthly breakfast series, which I actually think is really awesome. And one, because breakfast fits into my schedule and my life really well and is much more convenient for me than lunch or after work drinks. And so once a month, she rents space at a fun, trendy restaurant that I might like to try for dinner but don't have any time for, and invites a group of her also female clients. And so it becomes this nice in-person peer group of other women who are senior in-house lawyers or GCs at other companies, and she curates this group over time. And I've been participating in this for about like two plus years now, and I really look forward to these breakfasts. But that's also a way for her, as a relatively youngish, juniorish partner, to build up her client portfolio and have all these people be sort of loyal to her. And in fact, when she moved from one law firm to another law firm, that group was portable to her, and she brought all that business with her to her new law firm. And I think in large part it was because of this breakfast group and how she had built those relationships over time. Another example I can think of is, someone else mentioned pro bono work, and I do a lot of pro bono work too. I'm on the board of Urban Pathways. I'm also involved with an organization called Her Justice, which helps women who are victims of domestic violence. And so if people want to interact with me through my pro bono work, either law firms who want to partner with me on working on a case, or if I have a charity event and I invite them to it, if they come and attend my charity event, I think that is a meaningful way to deepen our relationship around something that I care about. And another law firm that I can think of, they knew that I had this passion for women's issues and pro bono, and they had bought a table at a gala for an organization that I wasn't involved with that I was interested in. It was Girls Who Code, helping women from young women learn STEM and science skills. And they invited me to this event, and not only did the male partner who had been building the relationship come to it, but he had also, I think, heard through the grapevine that we had recently been referred to another partner at his firm, and he invited that partner to come to this event as well as a sort of surprise, unannounced guest, and sat him next to me at the table. And I think that was not an accident. It was some excellent business development, but he arranged a situation where he knew I would come because I was interested in the subject matter, and then that was, an hour and a half in which I was a captive audience to two partners from this law firm. Which I wouldn't have agreed to under any other circumstances. It was just because I was passionate about the cause. So those are some examples, I think, of ways that you can develop business.
Terrific. Thank you. What about less desirable forms of follow-up? Is there anything that people do that just really is off-putting, that make you find annoying or off-putting? Let me start with Shaila.
My previous supervisor, who so I mostly did in my previous position, I mostly did transactional work, and he oversaw litigation as well. And he met a litigator, and this guy for 2 years sent him weekly emails. And they met once, and the guy would send, like, for every holiday, happy Valentine's Day, I hope your day is swell, we're still looking for work from you, please call me, And I mean, it was like just ongoing and ongoing. And at some point, the gentleman I was working with was like, I'll never give this guy work because I don't have any connection with the guy. I met him one time, and I get these emails, and they're just a nuisance, And so obviously I think that is one way that is off-putting, is just, but I think overall overall you have to trust your gut, and you have to do what's natural to you when you're trying to network or reach out. And so I think when you come across awkward, I once had somebody invite me for drinks, and the first thing they said when I met them for drinks is, oh, I don't drink, I don't even like alcohol, but I hope you do because that's why I invited you here. I mean, it's fine. It doesn't mean that you have to drink, but then at least do something that's natural to you, or that is comfortable for you, because you didn't have to do me that favor, right? It could have been coffee, it could have been lunch, it could have been a walk, it could have been something else. So I think you got to be natural. You can't, and you got to put your best self forward, basically.
Thanks. How about, this is one of those questions that also tends to come up a lot, right? Experts cite various statistics about how many meaningful touches are needed before making a sale, right? Sometimes people say something like 7 to 14 is on the low end. So in your experience, how many times do you typically communicate with a lawyer or firm before you hire them for a matter? Understanding, of course, this is, a huge generalization, but let me go ahead with Shaila on this one. Shaila?
Sorry, the mute button was stuck. I think this is a quality versus a quantity thing. I do think it takes a lot of touches. I mean, it's just like any other relationship that you build. You have to start somewhere. You start with a first date. You start with meeting someone at a networking event, and you have to build that relationship. And it's really quality over quantity. I mean, if I spend 4 hours with you building bicycles for the YMCA as a pro bono activity, and we're working together as a team, and in that 4 hours we've talked about our families, we've talked about where we're from, we've shared a few stories, we've had a few laughs, and then afterwards, you're like, hey, let's go out for coffee or let's grab lunch, and then that even though it's one encounter, that could count for 20 encounters, And so, but I do think that I think one place that in my experience that has been, that I've seen women not be as successful as men, is that they're not as persistent. I think they give up too easily, and it does take time to build those relationships, and you have to invest in them.
Absolutely. All right, we're going to move on to the more specific asking for business type questions. So, Angela, I'm going to ask you this one first. Women are often told that they should be more direct in asking for business, yet, right, it might be obvious that if a law firm lawyer is reaching out to offer you information or invite you to events or tell you that they're stopping by your city, that she's positioning herself to get business. So when would you suggest that women should actually be more direct? And when is the context and their actions enough?
I would probably err on the side of being more direct rather than assuming that the other person knows that you're asking for business. I can be a bit distracted at times. Typically, I'm involved in something that's going on at work that's kind of taking up all of my gray matter. And so I need someone to be direct and say, Angela, I'm going to be in Anchorage, which is an odd place to be for most folks anyway, but I'm going to be in Anchorage and I would like to meet with you and talk about this firm I just joined or this practice that I'm developing. I don't mind when people are being direct, and I hope that it can kind of short circuit through some of the needless dance around asking for business, because here in Anchorage we are, geographically we're pretty remote, and so having somebody that's either stopping by or wants to reach out and talk about how they can help us move forward is rare.
Thanks. What about gender differences and perceptions of directness? I'm going to ask Erin this one. Do you think that male general counsel and other male in-house decision makers tend to see directness the same way you do, or do you see gender differences here?
I'm hesitant to generalize, broadly speaking, in terms of gender. I think it depends on the person specifically. I do think that it is better to be pretty direct about it and to be clear that you're asking someone for business. I know women who are good at that and who have built relationships over time that I know are primarily business relationships, even though they're friendly. And at the end of every interaction, even if it feels or seems social, they'll say, by the way, if there's anything that I can help you with, if you're working on anything new that I can be, of assistance with, please don't hesitate to let me know. And I certainly don't mind that at all. And it kind of frames and grounds the conversation for me. And it reminds me to think of them, to keep them top of mind. Whereas I've definitely seen male, outside counsel go the opposite way. I recently had, a intro coffee with outside counsel who was referred to me by someone in the company, who I didn't know very well. I just kind of went to coffee with him as a favor. And we spent the entire coffee just sort of chit-chatting and gossiping, and he asked me a lot of questions about my family, and I asked him a lot of questions about his neighborhood, and at the end of 45 minutes, he hadn't really even told me what kind of law he practiced or, in what ways that he could help me or when I might hire him. And I ended up thinking that was not a super excellent use of my time, so I wish that he had been more direct.
Great. Yeah, thanks. And of course, yes, it's going to depend from person to person, certainly. There's also, let's see, I'll ask Shaila this one. I know it's again on the gender differences question, but a little bit different. What differences do you see in terms of male and female lawyers who approach you for business? Right, and if you do see any differences, what conclusions have you drawn from your observations?
In my experience, so I was involved with a women's bar association for 2 years, and in this particular case, I was there for 2 years. I was one of the co-chairs of the in-house counsel committee. I went to a monthly co-chair meeting, and the table is mostly filled with outside counsel, with law firm attorneys. And in those 2 years, I got to know people, and never once did I get asked for coffee, invited to even their firm events or to a CLE or anything. And I was just, in the end, when I had to give something up because I got some more administrative responsibilities at the company, it was really easy for me to give that up because in the end, when I looked back at it, I really didn't get anything out of it. It didn't, and of course, I guess I could have been more aggressive. I could have been the one to say, hey, what's going on? But generally that's why I left the law firm, so that I didn't have to be the one doing the asking. I wanted to be the one being asked. So, it's one of those things where, and then I'm involved with all these other bar associations, and it never fails. There'll be someone, I'll be in an event and someone will seek me out. They'll know the company, they'll know something, or we'll have somebody in common. And, in my experience, in those other environments, like men and women tend to make asks, and I don't know what it was, to be honest, but I did see a real gender difference and I had never noticed it so much before. And when I was asked by the outgoing president why I was stepping down, and I explained this to her, she was at a firm, and she's like, you're right. She's like, I have thought about it from time and again that, I should ask you for business, or ask you to meet, or to get to know you better, or to at least tell you what my firm does and the things that my firm could do for you. And, in the 2 years that we've worked together, like, it's surprising to me that I've not done that. And I said, well, that's what my experience has been. So, I guess the other thing that I would just say is that I do see, I think it depends on kind of the environment. I think there are aggressive men and there are aggressive women. There are quiet men and there are quiet women. So it's kind of hard to overall generalize. But I have seen women take this more seriously. I've seen women kind of pick up their game a little bit. It used to be the guys, when I first started practicing law, it used to be the guys that were going to the golf course, and us girls that were left behind as associates. We said, this is ridiculous. And we used to take, my girlfriends and I that were law firm associates, we started taking once a week golf lessons. Because we said, this is silly. We don't get invited to any golf events. It's only the guys that get to go, and we're totally excluded. Well, what I've seen over time is now women attorneys are things that I've been invited to are, a networking event or an event at Dry Bar where we're all getting our hair done together, or going to one of my favorite events is there's a law firm in Northern Virginia, and there's an outside place called Wolf Trap in Virginia where they bring bands and different. They bring bands, they bring plays or musicals or different things. And so every summer they have a women's event where they will have like a picnic, and they'll invite all their women clients or potential clients to network, and then we all go to a concert together, And so I've seen more of an effort, and I just would encourage women to continue to be creative and to think of ways to network with other women, because guys have seemed to do it and do it just fine for a long time.
Wonderful, thank you. So now a little bit of advice for smaller firms. So a lot of lawyers are leaving large firms and starting solo and small practices. And these lawyers are sometimes hesitant to approach larger companies for fear that the companies would only want to work with big firms just because of the deeper bench. Angela, what are your thoughts about this?
Anna, I'm so glad. I was hoping you would ask me this question because I came from a small firm, and I think that everyone should be fearless, regardless of what firm they come from, in terms of approaching companies for business. I encourage small and regional firms to approach me about their expertise in an area. Prior to moving to Alaska, I worked in New Orleans, where regional expertise was key in getting things moving on either a litigation or a transactional matter. So I really appreciate the benefits that small firms can bring to the table. And I think that they need to look, or if you're coming from a small firm and you're looking to pitch someone, look at what makes you unique. Look at what makes you a better fit or a preferable option for that in-house counsel, because I'm telling you, there's ups and downs to every side of that, and look at what the ups are for you and really emphasize those and go for it.
Thanks. All right, cross-selling. Erin, I'm going to ask you this one, if that's all right. So firms are putting a lot more emphasis than they used to on cross-selling. How do you feel about outside counsel introducing you to their partners in an attempt to generate work in a new subject area?
You know, I think it has to be in something that I've expressed some previous interest in, or that has like a logical nexus to my practice area. You know, I don't generally appreciate it when there's sort of a hard sell and, you know, they ask me to have lunch with or spend some time with someone in a practice area where we're not immediately looking to hire counsel in that area, or whether it's something like you know, that has been so hot in the news lately. Like, you know, it seems like almost every law firm I have any kind of relationship with wants to introduce me to their GDPR and data privacy team, because that's a hot area and a lot of people are immersed in that. And I kind of feel like it's not that helpful to introduce me to those folks, because we've already identified our counsel in that area quite a long time ago, and we don't really want to meet the people who do that work at every single law firm. So I would say it's okay to cross-sell if it's something that you think, you know, would really be in my best interest, and I've expressed some interest to you in wanting to meet folks at your firm who do that kind of thing. I also wanted to touch briefly on the last question about smaller firms and solos, because that's also an issue that's near and dear to my heart. And I certainly think that I look for every opportunity that I can to hire qualified small firms and solos, primarily because they're much less expensive than the big firms. The problem is I don't always know where to find them. I don't know them by reputation the same way I know the big firms. And so the thing that helps me identify excellent small firms and solo practitioners is referrals from inside my network. So if you are a practitioner at a small firm, or you're a solo and you have a satisfied client who's a member of Women General Counsel Network or Tech GCA Network, have them give you a plug next time someone sends around an email and says, you know, do you know a litigator in Akron, Ohio, or do you know an immigration practitioner who can handle a matter in Seattle? And that happens to be you. Like, ask the person you know who's a member of these influential groups to give you a plug, to give you a referral.
Great, thank you. Now, one of the common things that one hears when one listens to panels of, of general counsel, common concern is that outside counsel don't truly understand their business, right? Yet law firm lawyers usually believe that they understand their clients and prospective the clients' businesses. Angela, what advice would you have for lawyers who want to gain really a deeper understanding of a business?
I think two things are really critical. One of them is just the asking questions all the time over everything and never assuming anything. A great example of this is we were successful last year on an appeal to the DC Circuit on a fairly narrow and nuanced issue here in Alaska involving the Trans-Alaska Pipeline. The DC firm that we retained for that representation did not have any experience in Alaska or TAPS, but they had a really interesting take on the case, and I liked their proffered solution. So we went forward with them, but it required a lot of education on their part, and they were relentless. They asked question after question. They met with our operations. They came here to Anchorage to see our operations, to meet with people. They spent days poring over fairly dry and pretty boring regulatory restrictions and spreadsheets, and they really dove in feet first. And I think that level of commitment and that level of relentlessly asking questions until they felt like they had a good understanding of the issue and really led to our success at the case. We prevailed at the DC Circuit, and it was because they took a very complicated issue, boiled it down and made it simple to understand, and then relayed that to the DC Circuit in a really innovative way.
Terrific. Shaila, I'm going to ask you this one. How can lawyers convey to you that they truly understand your business? Right? I mean, whether they understand it or not is one thing, but how are they actually able to communicate that? Right? And conversely, what kinds of things do lawyers say that signal that they really don't understand your business?
Well, I can answer the second one first. I can't tell you how many people are like, oh, you work for Exxon? No, that would be Exelon, different company. You know, it's one of those things where it's hard. I think it's hard to show that you understand the business, but there's a very common mistake I think people make, and it's the easiest thing to fix, is if you're dealing with someone that's at a public company, read their 10K. Learn just a little bit about their business so you know what kinds of questions to ask, you know what space they're in, you know. And so and this is the second public company I've worked for, and it's so often that happens where, they don't know, even, I think even a cursory review of our website would tell you more. And so then you just make those silly mistakes where you put your foot in your mouth because you say something wrong, and then it's just very off-putting. So I think that's an easy way to signal that you don't understand, and especially if I'm meeting you for the first time, it's not a very good first impression. Because it's something so easy to have done. But as far as like how they can convey they truly understand, it's kind of the same thing. It's asking a lot of questions. It's trying to delve into the issue and trying to, compare, analyze, compare, contrast. It's the way us lawyers kind of think through, and the way that we show we're thinking through. Those are the ways I think that help. But at a minimum, you should know the industry that I'm in. You should have, at least since for us, we have a 10K, read that. Even a Google search of what we're in the news for. Those kinds of things is a good start. Energy is such a, one of my colleagues I'm sure will agree with me, and I'm sure energy in Alaska is even harder, but it's a very, small industry in some respects, and it's very complicated. Even as a lawyer here, there's a lot that I don't understand. So I'm not expecting you to tell me how a nuclear reactor works, or, how our transmission and distribution lines are connected and how that connects to the grid or anything like that. I just want to know that you understand the woes of my business and that you understand that we are regulated. And so I'm not looking for a whole deeper understanding, just to know that you care enough to have reviewed or a little bit about it, so we can start the conversation. And then I often will educate my attorneys, with what they need to know. And then if they're inquisitive and they ask the right questions, they'll get there.
Terrific. Thank you. All right. We only have a couple minutes to get through the pitching questions, but we'll give it our best shot. So Erin, would you answer this one? What approaches to pitching have you found most useful and engaging?
Yeah, I have a few tips that sort of fall into some of the other categories, that we've touched on as well. But one thing that I found really helps distinguish outside law firms is when they get the scoop on something. Like, for example, if they have an alert set up for my company's name and they're following PACER dockets, and they're the first ones to let me know that we've been sued in an action where I haven't even been served yet. I ended up hiring patent counsel this way. There was a firm that we hadn't worked with before, and the lawyer that I had had a few, brief encounters with, like, a lunch here and a networking function there, she happened to send me a link at noon on a Sunday and said, I happen to be scanning the PACER docket. I saw you were named in this complaint. I don't even know if you're aware of it yet. In fact, I wasn't. I hadn't been served yet. And having those extra 2 days of a heads up before I got into the office to review the complaint and prepare to speak to my CEO and our board about it was extremely helpful. So much so that then when I brought in 3 different firms to pitch for the patent matter, I felt that her firm really had the edge, and we ended up retaining them. And so I think it really pays to, get ahead, and also to do your homework, to understand the business, understand how does this company make money, to understand, what is their strategic advantage, how are they better than their competitors, and not to make those kind of silly mistakes. Like, I can't tell you how many times it has happened that a law firm full of several people in suits will show up at my downtown Soho loft office, and they'll be sweating and they'll be huffing and puffing, and they'll say, oh my God, I'm so sorry, our Uber was stuck in traffic. I'm like, you guys are dead. Like, you might as well just turn around and walk right out the door. Like, that's a major competitor of ours. Why did you not take a VA to come to this meeting? And just to make a silly sort of like a self-inflicted wound kind of mistake like that at the beginning of your pitch, you would think no one would ever do it, but they do. So to say you really understand the business, you understand what makes people tick, and you're the first one to get the story. Like, you have them top of mind. I think those things all really help in making a good pitch that stands out.
Thanks. Shaila, now that you have the in-house perspective, if you were in the role of a law firm lawyer preparing for a pitch, what kind of preparatory research would you do? I know you've sort of covered this, but do you have anything else to add, or do you feel like we're okay on this one and we could move on?
I think we should. I mean, I think we've covered it. So since we have a short amount of time.
Yep. So, are you open to discussing a pitch ahead of time in order to help ensure that the firm is on the right track? I've heard sometimes in-house people will say that they're open to that. So I was just wondering from your perspective, how do you see this?
Me? Shaila?
Yes, sorry.
Okay.
Yes, Shaila.
So that goes back to, as an in-house counsel, as an in-house attorney, you know, when my firms are good and it doesn't even, I mean, hopefully we have a good outcome in what we're working on, but that's not even critical. If the firm was good and they were thorough and folks that worked with them thought they did a good job and they understood the company, they understood what we were trying to do, we worked well together, that looks good for me. Like, that reflects well on me. And similarly, in bad situations, it reflects poorly on me. And so for me, it depends. It's the same thing. If I'm going to help you with your pitch, or you're going to use my name in your pitch, I need to know ahead of time that that's a good idea, or that I'm not going to get, my reputation isn't going to get dinged by it. So it really, for me, depends on whether I have that rapport with you, or whether, for example, I got you the pitch. Then I might be more willing to help. And there have been times that I've helped, but there's been times where folks will email me. I met them 2 times. They say, I'm pitching the company. Do you have any advice? And I'll say, you know, please make sure you just read I'll give them the generic advice. Make sure you read up on the company and you read the 10K and those kinds of things.
Okay, thank you. And so, Erin, final question. So after a pitch, what kind of follow-up do you appreciate? Versus what kind of follow-up, if any? Is there any kind of follow-up that annoys you? Erin? If you're talking, we can't hear you.
Oh, hi, sorry. I lost connectivity there for a quick second. Can you repeat the question?
Yes, so following up after a pitch. So what kind of follow-up do you appreciate versus what kind of follow-up might annoy you, if any?
Yeah, that's a good question. I generally appreciate, you know, following up a couple days later after a pitch and saying, you know, is there anything that we didn't think of that you might like us to address? Is there any additional information that we can provide to you? But generally, I don't like when people follow up like every day or the day right after the pitch, you know, and ask if we've decided yet. I kind of like to be able to decide on my own time frame. When people follow up too many times in a row, or ask me if we made a decision yet, and I didn't sort of telegraph to them that we would be making a decision in a very short period of time, I kind of find that to be like a little bit pushy and aggressive. I do like to tell people if they didn't win a pitch. I think it's sort of a matter of good corporate hygiene to say, you know, you didn't win if you took time to come in and prepare materials for me. I do like to tell people, you know, we selected another firm, and if they're curious to know why, you know, I'll happily provide them a couple of points on that. So I don't think it's nice to never tell people that they didn't prevail in the pitch, but I think I should be the one sort of driving the timeline in that case.
Well, a huge thank you to all of you for being here. We're hearing background noise, so if you want to go ahead and mute yourselves. We really appreciate you taking your time out of your very busy schedules to provide tips and advice to our listeners. So also a sincere thank you to all of you who chose to spend your time with us here today. Please stay on the webinar to give us your feedback. You feel free to reach out to Jeannie Lee or Carol Bass if you have any questions. We have upcoming webinars on June 20th. Our next webinar is Mentors, Sponsors, and Coaches. What is the difference and how do I find them? And we're in the process of organizing the rest of our webinars for 2018. If you have any suggestions, please forward them to Jeannie or Carol. You can also learn more about Women Rainmaker activities through our Women Rainmakers homepage, and the link is here on slide 34. And if you would like to see more about how to implement some of the tips that you're being given through the rainmaking webinars, you can purchase our Women Rainmakers book, Marketing Success, How Did She Do That?, which is available through the ABA store. We wish you a very successful rainmaking in 2018, and we hope to see you on June 20th for our next webinar. Thank you, and here's to your successful rainmaking.